My greedy son-in-law thought I was just a senile old fool. He shoved fake documents in my face. Sign this immediately. He already pictured himself owning my $890,000 house. I simply smiled. I spotted the clumsy scam in seconds. Then they were both begging on their knees when the police stormed in. Before continuing, subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is in your region right now. My name is Abner Harrison. I'm 67 years old, and I live in Portland, Oregon. Spent 40 years as a notary, specializing in real estate and estate law. People trusted me with their most important documents, their futures. I thought I'd seen every con, every scam. Turns out I hadn't seen the one coming from inside my own house. I live in a 2-story Craftsman on Hawthorne Boulevard, worth about $890,000 in today's market. It's not just a house to me. It's where I raised Shannon, my daughter, after her mother passed when she was 12. Every room holds a memory. My study on the second floor is lined with my clock collection, 47 timepieces, some dating back to the 1800s. I find peace in their mechanisms, in the precision of gears and springs working exactly as they should. 8 months ago, Shannon showed up at my door with tears in her eyes and her husband Jared beside her, wearing what I now recognize as a carefully practiced expression of concern. "Dad," she said, "we're in a bit of trouble. Jared's real estate business hit a rough patch. We might lose our apartment. Could we stay here for a few weeks? Just until we get back on our feet." What father could say no? Jared Coleman, that's what he calls himself now, is 38 years old, with the kind of smile that probably got him far in sales. Tall, well-groomed, always dressed like he's heading to a business meeting, even when he's sitting at my breakfast table. When he first started dating Shannon 4 years ago, I wanted to like him. I really did. He brought flowers, asked about my day, seemed genuinely interested in my clock collection. Shannon was happy, or at least she seemed happy, and that was enough for me. But people show you who they really are eventually. You just have to pay attention. The first week after they moved in, Jared was still playing the grateful son-in-law. He'd offer to help with groceries, fix things around the house that weren't broken. Shannon was quieter than I remembered, always checking her phone, always looking to Jared before answering my questions. I told myself it was just the stress of their situation. By the second month, the mask started slipping. I'd hear them talking late at night in the guest room. Well, arguing is more accurate. Shannon's voice pleading, Jared's cold and dismissive. The words, "It's taking too long," and the old man came through my bedroom wall more than once. I'm not deaf, and these walls aren't as thick as they think. Jared stopped asking about my day, started treating me like furniture. He'd walk past me in the hallway without acknowledgement, leave his dishes in the sink for me to clean, change the thermostat without asking. Shannon followed his lead, or maybe she was leading him. I still don't know which is worse. The daughter who used to hug me goodnight now barely made eye contact. 3 weeks ago, I walked into my own kitchen and found them hunched over Shannon's laptop, speaking in low tones. The moment I entered, they snapped it shut. "Just looking at apartments, Dad," Shannon said too quickly. "We'll be out of your hair soon." But they weren't looking at apartments. I could see the reflection in the window behind them before the screen went dark. Legal documents, property forms, my address printed at the top. I'm not a stupid man, but I wanted to believe I was wrong. I wanted to believe my daughter wouldn't do this. So I waited, watched, listened. That brings us to tonight, March 3rd, about 20 minutes ago. We were having dinner, if you can call sitting at the same table while they ignored me, having dinner. I'd made pot roast, Shannon's favorite when she was young. She pushed it around her plate like it was cafeteria food. Jared ate mechanically, checking his watch every few minutes. Then he stood up, left the dining room, and came back with a leather folder, the expensive kind lawyers use. He set it on the table next to my plate with a sound that seemed too loud in the quiet room. "Abner," he said, "not Dad, not even Mr. Harrison. We need you to sign these papers tonight." I looked up from my plate. "What papers?" "Insurance documents for the house. Standard stuff. The policy's expiring, and we need to get this processed immediately." He flipped open the folder, revealing a stack of forms with colored tabs, marking where signatures were needed. Shannon jumped in, her voice unnaturally bright. It's just a formality, Dad. Jared knows someone who can get us a better rate, but they need it by tomorrow morning. It'll save you like $300 a month. $300 a month. As if I'm the kind of fool who doesn't read what he signs. I pulled the first document toward me. Jared tensed. I saw it in his shoulders, the way his jaw tightened. I've spent 40 years reading body language across closing tables. The header read, "Quitclaim deed." Not insurance, a property transfer. I felt something cold settle in my stomach, but I kept my face neutral. Scanned the document. There was my property description, my address, and there, in the transferee section, Jared Coleman and Shannon Coleman Harrison. They were trying to steal my house. I kept reading, slower than necessary now, watching them from my peripheral vision. The notary section was a disaster. Wrong format, wrong date stamp, seal impression that looked like it came from a cheap online fake. The witness lines had signatures I didn't recognize. This wasn't just fraud, it was clumsy fraud. After 40 years in this business, I can spot a forgery in 3 seconds. This one practically had "fake" stamped across it in red ink. "Abner," Jared's voice had an edge now, "we need to move on this. Just sign the highlighted sections." I looked up at him. Really looked at him. His eyes were hard, impatient, predatory. Shannon sat beside him, hands folded in her lap, not meeting my gaze. "This seems like a lot of pages for insurance," I said slowly, letting a slight tremor into my voice. "I'm not sure I understand all this legal language." Jared's face rearranged itself into something resembling patience. "That's why we're here to help you. It's complicated, sure, but trust me, this is good for you. For all of us. Trust him. Right. I'd like to read through it more carefully," I said. "Maybe sleep on it. We can sign tomorrow." The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. "Tomorrow's too late." Jared leaned forward. "The deadline is tonight. If we don't get this filed by morning, we lose the rate. Do you want to pay an extra $300 every month because you were too stubborn to sign a simple form?" Shannon finally looked at me. "Dad, please. We're trying to help you. Why do you have to make everything so difficult?" There it was, the real Shannon, or whoever she'd become. Not my little girl who used to fall asleep on my shoulder during movie nights. This stranger who thought I was a senile obstacle to her inheritance. I set down the pen I'd been holding. "I appreciate your concern, but I need time to think about this. I'm sure one more day won't hurt." Jared's hand slammed on the table. Not hard enough to be threatening, but hard enough to make his point. "You're not thinking clearly, Abner. Shannon, talk to your father." "Dad!" Her voice took on a wheedling tone that made my skin crawl. "You're being paranoid. It's just paperwork. Why would we try to hurt you?" "Why indeed?" "Tomorrow," I repeated, making my voice firmer. "That's final." Jared stared at me for a long moment. I could see him calculating, deciding whether to push harder or retreat. Finally, he gathered up the papers and stood. "Fine. We'll discuss this tomorrow, but you're making a mistake." They left the dining room together, Shannon's hand on Jared's arm, murmuring something I couldn't hear. I heard their bedroom door close upstairs, then their voices, low and urgent. I sat alone at the table, my pot roast congealing on the plate. The clock on the mantel, an 1887 Ansonia, my favorite, ticked steadily, each second measured and certain. They think I'm a foolish old man. They think I don't understand what I almost signed. They have no idea who they're dealing with. I stood up slowly, my knees protesting as they always do after sitting too long, cleared the table, washed the dishes. Every movement normal, routine. Upstairs, their voices continued, too muffled to make out words, but not emotion. Frustration, anger, impatience. Let them think they're winning. Let them think I'm confused, easily manipulated. Tomorrow, I'll start playing a different game, one they won't see coming until it's far too late. I turned off the kitchen light and stood in the darkness, listening to the clocks. 47 timepieces, all keeping perfect time. The question isn't whether they'll try again. The question is how badly I'll make them wish they hadn't. I didn't sleep that night, not 1 minute. I lay in my bed, staring at the ceiling, listening to the house settle around me. Around 2 a.m, I heard their door open, footsteps in the hallway. They stopped outside my room. I could see the shadow under my door, 2 pairs of feet. listening to see if I was awake, maybe. After a minute, they moved on. The toilet flushed, water ran, then silence again. But my mind wasn't silent. It was racing through 40 years of experience, cataloging every detail of those forged documents. The seal was wrong, pre-2018 format, which Oregon stopped using after the registry update. The signature lines had the wrong spacing. Even the paper stock felt off, too thin for official county documents. Whoever forged these was either incompetent or rushing, probably both. The question that kept me awake wasn't whether they were trying to steal my house. That was obvious. The question was, how long had they been planning this? And was this their first attempt? Or were there other victims? As dawn broke through my window, something else kept circling back in my mind. A memory. Shannon was 7 years old. We'd gone to the coast for the weekend, just the two of us. Her mother had died the year before, and I was still figuring out how to be both parents. We were walking on Cannon Beach, collecting shells, when Shannon found a sand dollar. Perfect, and white, and whole. "Can I keep it, Daddy?" she asked, her small hand holding it up to the morning light. "Of course, sweetheart. You found it fair and square." She studied it carefully, turning it over and over. What if someone else lost it? What if they're looking for it? I knelt down beside her in the sand. Then they should have taken better care of it. When something's valuable, you don't just leave it lying around for anyone to take. She nodded solemnly and put the sand dollar in her pocket. I taught her that. And now, here we are. The irony wasn't lost on me as I lay there in the dark. I'd raised her to be careful with valuable things. Apparently, I'd forgotten to teach her that included trust. That included her father. At 6:30, I got up, showered, dressed, made coffee the same way I do every morning. 2 scoops, water to the 6-cup line, exactly 3 minutes to brew. Routine keeps you grounded when everything else is shifting. Jared came down around 8. He looked surprised to see me up, dressed, reading the newspaper at the kitchen table like nothing had happened. "Morning," I said, not looking up from the sports section. He poured himself coffee, watching me over the rim of his mug. "About last night?" "I've been thinking about those papers," I interrupted. "You're right. I was being difficult. It's probably just my age making me suspicious of everything." I glanced up in time to see the flash of triumph in his eyes before he buried it under false concern. "Not at all, Abner. It's smart to be careful. I appreciate you reconsidering. I'd still like to have my lawyer friend look at them, though, just for my own peace of mind. I'm sure you understand." His smile tightened almost imperceptibly. "Of course. When do you think you could get that done?" "I'll call him this morning. Maybe I could bring the papers by his office this afternoon?" I let a slight eagerness creep into my voice, the eagerness of an old man grateful that young people are paying attention to him. "That works." He set down his mug. "I'll make a copy for you to take. The originals need to stay here for the filing." "Sure, sure." I nodded, still playing the befuddled elder. "Whatever you think is best." After he went back upstairs, I stood at the kitchen sink, gripping the counter edge. My hands were shaking. Not from fear, from rage, but rage is useless without a plan. I thought about another memory. Shannon at 16 caught sneaking out to meet friends after curfew. I'd been waiting in the living room when she climbed back through her window at 2 a.m. "Disappointed?" she'd asked defiantly when I turned on the light. "No," I'd said. "Just wondering what happened to the daughter I raised, the one who knew better." She'd cried then, real tears, not the manipulative kind. Apologized, promised to do better, and she had for years. She'd been a good kid, went to college, got a decent job. When had that changed? When she met Jared. That's when. Or maybe I just want to believe that. Maybe the seeds were always there and Jared just watered them. At 9 o'clock I left the house, told them I was going for my morning walk, something I do every day. They barely looked up from their phones. But I didn't go to the park. I drove downtown to an office building on 5th Avenue, took the elevator to the 3rd floor, knocked on a door marked Martinez and Associates, Legal Services. Gerald Martinez looked up from his desk when I walked in. We'd worked together on dozens of closings over the years. He handles the legal side, I handle the notarization. He's 52, sharp as they come, and doesn't suffer fools or criminals gladly. "Abner, huh? This is a surprise. You're supposed to be retired." "I am. This is personal. I sat down across from him and pulled out my phone. I need you to look at something, and I need you to be honest with me about how serious this is. I showed him the photos I'd taken of the documents while Jared was making coffee. Every page, every detail. Gerald scrolled through them, his expression darkening with each swipe. When he finished, he set my phone down carefully like it might explode. This is a quitclaim deed attempting to transfer your property to Jared Coleman and Shannon Coleman Harrison. I know what it is. I want to know if it's what I think it is. It's forged. Badly. The notary seal alone would get thrown out in any court. But here's the thing, Abner. If you'd signed this, it would still be recorded at the county office. It would still create a cloud on your title. Fighting it would take months, maybe years. Legal fees in the tens of thousands. And during all that time, your son-in-law could potentially sell the property to a third-party buyer. Then you're fighting not just him, but an innocent purchaser. My stomach turned over. So even though it's fake, it could work. Long enough to destroy you, yes. By the time the court sorted it out, he'd have your money and be long gone. Gerald leaned forward. You need to go to the police. Right now. This is attempted fraud, forgery, probably a dozen other charges. No, he blinked. No, not yet. An idea was forming in my mind. A cold, precise idea that felt like tumblers clicking into place. If I go to the police now, what happens? They arrest him, maybe. If the evidence holds up, he gets a lawyer, posts bail, claims it was a misunderstanding. Maybe he does a few months in county jail. Maybe he gets probation, and then he's out there, free to do this to someone else. What are you suggesting? I'm suggesting I want to know everything about Jared Coleman, his real background, his history, every place he's lived, every person he's conned, because a man doesn't get this comfortable with fraud without practice. Gerald studied me for a long moment. You want to build a real case, not just stop him, but bury him. Exactly. He pulled a business card from his desk drawer and slid it across to me. Saul Fisher, private investigator, former Portland PD detective, specialized in fraud cases. Tell him I sent you. I pocketed the card. How much? His retainer is usually $3,000. For someone like Jared, probably $3,000. $200 total for a comprehensive background check. He paused. Abner, are you sure about this? This is your daughter's husband. Your family. They stopped being my family when they tried to steal my home. I stood up. Send me your bill for today's consultation. There's no bill? But Abner? He stood too. Be careful. If he realizes what you're doing, he might accelerate his timeline. These people can be dangerous when cornered. So can I said quietly. I left his office and sat in my car in the parking garage for 10 minutes, just breathing, processing. Then I called the number on Saul Fisher's card. By noon, I had an appointment scheduled for the next day. By 1 o'clock, I was back home, shuffling through the front door like the old man they expected to see. Jared was waiting in the living room. Did you see your lawyer friend? Oh, yes, I said, injecting confusion into my voice. He said it all looked fine, very standard. He did mention something about title insurance, but I didn't quite understand that part. You know how lawyers talk. The relief on Jared's face was almost comical. That's great news, Abner. Really great. So you're ready to sign? Well, I'd still like to think about it a bit more. Maybe we could do it this weekend. His jaw tightened, but he forced a smile. Sure. This weekend works. I went upstairs to my room, closed the door, sat on my bed, and finally let myself feel it all. The betrayal, the anger, the grief. My daughter. My own daughter. But grief is a luxury I couldn't afford yet. I opened my laptop and started making notes. Everything I knew, everything I'd observed, everything I suspected. Building a case file in my mind, one piece at a time. The clock on my nightstand ticked steadily. A 1924 Sessions mantel clock, oak case, perfect condition. I wound it carefully, watching the gears move through the glass panel in back. Everything working exactly as designed. Everything in its place. That's what I needed to be now. Precise, patient, methodical. They think they're hunting me. They have no idea I've just become the hunter. Outside my window, Portland was going about its day. Traffic hummed, birds sang, life continued, oblivious. But inside this house, the real game was just beginning. The next morning, I met Saul Fisher at a coffee shop on Northwest 23rd Avenue. He was a broad-shouldered man in his late 50s with the kind of face that had seen too much and remembered all of it. Former police detective, Gerald had said. It showed in the way he assessed me. Quick, thorough, missing nothing. Mr. Martinez gave me the basics, Saul said, sliding a contract across the table. Background check on Jared Coleman. Comprehensive. $3,200, payable half up front. I signed the contract and wrote him a check for $1,600 right there. How long? Depends what I find. Could be 3 days, could be 10. I'll call you the moment I have something solid. He pocketed the check. One question, your daughter. Is she involved or is she a victim? I thought about Shannon's face at the dinner table, the way she'd looked at me like I was an inconvenience. I don't know yet. That's what I'm trying to figure out. Fair enough. I'll dig into both of them. He stood to leave, then paused. Mr. Harrison, if your son-in-law is as experienced as you think, he'll have eyes on you. Be careful what you do, where you go. Act normal. Don't give him any reason to think you're onto him. Normal? Right. I could do that. I spent the rest of that day researching security equipment online. The next day, while Jared and Shannon were out, they'd mentioned something about looking at office spaces for Jared's new venture. I drove to an electronics store in Beaverton, 20 minutes outside Portland, paid cash for 3 wireless security cameras with audio recording, $4,800. The clerk, a kid who couldn't have been more than 25, explained how to set them up on my phone. These bad boys will record everything, he said enthusiastically. Motion-activated, cloud storage, crystal clear video. You worried about break-ins? Something like that, I said. That evening, after they'd gone to bed, I installed the cameras. One in the living room, tucked behind a picture frame on the bookshelf. One in the kitchen, positioned on top of the cabinet, where I kept my lesser-used serving dishes. The third in the hallway outside my study, angled to catch anyone approaching the door where I kept my important documents. Each camera was no bigger than a bottle cap. They'd never notice them. I tested the feed on my phone. Perfect angles, clear audio. Everything I needed. Over the next few days, I played my role to perfection. The confused old man. I'd ask Jared the same question twice. Forget where I'd put my reading glasses. Make small errors that a younger, sharper person would never make. And Jared ate it up. Your father's really losing it, I heard him tell Shannon one afternoon. I was supposedly napping upstairs, but I was actually reviewing camera footage on my phone. He asked me 3 times today what day it was. This is going to be easier than I thought. Shannon's laugh was like ice. He's always been a little slow, even when I was a kid. That hurt more than I wanted to admit. But pain could wait. Right now, I needed information. The cameras captured everything. Jared pacing the living room while on phone calls, his voice low but not low enough. Shannon sorting through mail that wasn't addressed to her. Both of them sitting at my kitchen table. Laptops open, speaking in hushed tones about closing dates and transfer timelines. On the 4th day after installing the cameras, I got careless on purpose. Left my study door unlocked while I went for my afternoon walk. When I came back an hour later, the camera showed exactly what I'd suspected. Jared had gone into my study. He'd photographed several documents from my desk. Property deeds, bank statements, the title to my house. He thought he was being clever. He had no idea I was 3 steps ahead. That evening, Saul Fisher called. I've got something, he said. You're going to want to sit down for this. I was already sitting in my car in a grocery store parking lot. Engine off, windows up. Tell me. Jared Coleman has a record. 3 years back, Washington State. Suspected in a real estate fraud case involving an elderly couple. He convinced them to sign over their house for what he claimed was a refinancing. Walked away with $423,000 before they realized what happened. Case was dropped due to insufficient evidence. Turns out he'd covered his tracks pretty well. My hands tightened on the steering wheel. What else? That's just the beginning. I found similar complaints in California. 2 cases. Different names. Different women. Same pattern. He marries someone with family money, gets close to the parents, and then systematically drains them. Changes his name each time. Jared Coleman is his 3rd identity that I can confirm. What's his real name? Jared Baxter, born in Tacoma, did 2 years for check fraud when he was 25. Got out, cleaned up his act on paper, but clearly not in practice. Paper rustled on his end. Mr. Harrison, the total from the previous cases we can document, just over $2 million. And those are only the ones I found. There could be more. I sat in silence, processing. My daughter had married a serial con artist, and either she didn't know, which seemed impossible after 4 years, or she was helping him. There's one more thing, Saul continued. I talked to one of the previous victims, woman named Patricia Hoffman in Seattle. She said her daughter was involved, helped Jared gain access, played the loving daughter until the deed was done. Then they divorced, split the money, and moved on. Pattern suggests your Shannon might not be as innocent as you hope. The phone felt heavy in my hand. Send me everything you found, all of it. Will do? Mr. Harrison, be smart about this. Men like Baxter, they don't like being cornered. If he realizes you know, he won't realize anything. I'm just a confused old man, remember? I hung up and sat there in the parking lot for another 20 minutes, watching people come and go with their shopping carts. Normal people living normal lives. How nice that must be. When I got home, Shannon was in the kitchen making tea. She glanced at me, and for just a moment, I saw something in her eyes. Guilt? Calculation? I couldn't tell anymore. Hey, Dad. Want some tea? No, thank you, sweetheart. The endearment tasted like ash, but I forced it out. I think I'll just head upstairs, feeling a bit tired. You feeling okay? You look pale. Just my age catching up with me, I suppose. She nodded, already losing interest, turning back to her phone. I climbed the stairs slowly, making sure my gait was appropriately elderly. In my room, I pulled up the camera feeds, and there they were, in the living room, thinking I couldn't hear them. He's getting worse, Jared said. More forgetful. We need to move faster. Shannon set down her tea. What if he won't sign? We've been patient, but... Then we go with Plan B. I've already contacted Russell. He can forge the signature and backdate the notarization for $8,000. We'll have the paperwork filed before your father even knows what happened. And if he fights it? Jared's smile was predatory. He's 67 and confused. Who's going to believe him over official county records? By the time any court sorts it out, we'll have sold this place and be long gone. I watched Shannon nod. Just nod. No protest, no moral objection. Just cold agreement to steal from her own father. That's when I knew for certain. She wasn't a victim. She was a willing participant. I closed the camera app and sat on the edge of my bed. The 1924 sessions clock ticked away on my nightstand, steady, reliable, honest in its function, unlike the people living in my house. I thought about calling them downstairs right then, confronting them with everything I knew, watching their faces as I laid it all out. But that would be satisfying for maybe 10 minutes. And then what? They'd lawyer up, deny everything, claim the recordings were inadmissible or taken without consent. Jared would disappear like he had before, and Shannon would play the manipulated daughter. No, I needed them to incriminate themselves beyond any doubt. I needed proof so solid that no lawyer, no judge, no jury could question it. I needed them to actually commit the crime. The idea crystallized slowly, like frost forming on a window. Let them think they were winning. Let them proceed with their plan B. Get them to bring in this Russell person. Get them to attempt the fraud on camera with witnesses. And then, when they were completely trapped, spring the net. It was risky. It meant letting them get closer to stealing everything I owned, but it also meant building a case that would put them away for a very long time. I pulled out my phone and sent Gerald Martinez a message. Need to discuss timing and evidence requirements. Also need contact for Portland PD Fraud Division. His response came within minutes. Tomorrow morning, my office. I'll bring Detective Anderson from Economic Crimes. I set my phone down and looked at my reflection in the mirror across from my bed. The same face I'd had yesterday, but somehow different, harder, more focused. They thought they were playing me, but I'd been a notary for 4 decades. I'd spent my entire career identifying frauds, protecting people from scams, reading the fine print that others missed. This was my specialty, and they'd just brought a forgery into a master's house. I smiled at my reflection. It wasn't a pleasant smile. Let them think they're winning. Let them think I'm the fool. They'll learn the truth soon enough. The next morning, I drove to Gerald Martinez's office. Detective Philip Anderson was already there, a lean man in his 40s with tired eyes and the permanent squint of someone who'd reviewed too many financial documents under fluorescent lights. "Mr. Harrison," he said, shaking my hand, "Gerald's filled me in on the basics. You believe your son-in-law is attempting to defraud you of your property?" "I don't believe it. I know it." I pulled out my phone and showed him the camera footage. Jared and Shannon discussing Plan B, the forged quitclaim deed. Everything. Anderson watched in silence, his expression growing grimmer with each minute. When it finished, he sat back. "This is solid, but I need to be straight with you. Secretly recorded conversations in your own home are admissible in Oregon, but defense attorneys will try to tear them apart. What we really need is for him to attempt the fraud with a witness present, preferably law enforcement." "That's what I thought," I said. "So here's what I'm proposing. I tell Jared I've decided to sign. Set up a meeting. He'll bring his fake notary. You're there when it happens." Gerald leaned forward. "Abner, that's risky. If something goes wrong—" "Nothing will go wrong. I'll control the situation." I looked at Anderson. "Can you do it? Can you be there?" The detective considered. "We'd need probable cause for a warrant, or an invitation from you. The invitation is cleaner. You're setting up a legal document, signing at your home. You're concerned about fraud. You request police presence. We come in plain clothes, observe, and move in when they attempt to use fraudulent documents." He nodded slowly. "Yeah, we can do this. But I need everything you've got. Every recording, every piece of evidence Saul Fisher dug up. I need to brief my sergeant, and probably the DA's office." "How long?" "Give me a week, maybe 10 days. We need to do this right. One mistake, and this guy walks." 10 days. Could I maintain the act that long? Could I sit at the same table as Shannon, knowing what I knew, and pretend everything was normal? I'd have to. Over the next several days, the cameras captured more damning evidence. Jared on the phone with someone named Russell, discussing the old man's signature style and tremor patterns. Shannon researching real estate attorneys who wouldn't ask too many questions, both of them pricing out luxury cars and vacation homes in Mexico. They were already spending money they hadn't stolen yet. The arrogance was breathtaking. I continued my performance. The confused elder, asking simple questions, shuffling around the house, napping at odd hours. Every morning, Jared would give me this pitying look, like he was doing me a favor by tolerating my presence in my own home. On the evening of the 7th day, I went downstairs for a glass of water around midnight. Shannon was in the kitchen, laptop open, and she didn't hear me coming. The screen showed a real estate listing, my house, with professional photos I'd never authorized. "Coming soon," the listing read, $850,000. Classic Portland craftsman, move-in ready. She'd already hired a realtor. They weren't just planning to steal my house. They were actively preparing to sell it. I backed away slowly, returned to my room, pulled up the camera footage from earlier that evening. There it was, Shannon on the phone with a realtor, explaining that her elderly father had decided to move into assisted living, and she'd been given power of attorney to handle the sale. None of that was true. Not one word. I forwarded the footage to Detective Anderson with a timestamp. His response came through at 6 a.m. "This is perfect. We're ready. When do you want to do this?" I thought about it carefully. Timing mattered. Too soon, and they might not have everything in place. Too late, and they might complete the fraud before I could stop it. "They're getting impatient," I wrote back. "I'll tell them I'm ready to sign. Let's say April 2nd, 2 weeks from now. Gives them time to prepare. Gives us time to get everything lined up." "Confirmed. I'll coordinate with the DA. This is going to be federal since there's evidence of interstate fraud. FBI might want in." FBI. I sat with that for a moment. My son-in-law wasn't just a local con artist. He was the kind of criminal that warranted federal attention. That afternoon, I had what Shannon and Jared probably thought was a moment of clarity. I came downstairs, sat them both down in the living room, and said, "I've been thinking about those papers you wanted me to sign, the insurance documents." Jared's eyes lit up, but he kept his voice casual. "Oh, have you reconsidered?" "I think I've been making this too complicated. Your family. If you say it's good for me, then I trust you. I let my voice waver slightly, like an old man surrendering to inevitability. Let's just get it done. Shannon practically leaped up to hug me. Oh, Dad, that's wonderful. You won't regret this. I patted her back mechanically. When can we do it? I'd like to have it finished. All this uncertainty has been stressful. Jared pulled out his phone immediately. Let me check with my notary contact. I want to make sure we do this properly. Have everything official. He stepped into the other room, voice low. I could see him through the doorway, texting rapidly, then calling someone. His body language was excited, predatory. He thought he'd won. He came back 5 minutes later. He can do April 2nd, 2 p.m., here at the house. That work for you? Perfect, I said. I'll make sure I'm here. Oh, we'll make sure of that too, Shannon said with a laugh, like it was a joke. After they went upstairs that night, I sat in my study with the door closed. The hidden camera in the hallway would catch anyone approaching. On my desk, I'd spread out everything Saul had found. Police reports from Washington and California, victim statements, photos of Jared with different names, different women, a trail of devastation stretching back years. My phone buzzed. A message from Detective Anderson. You're sure about this? Once we set it in motion, we're committed. If you want to back out? I'm sure, I typed back. April 2nd, 2 p.m. I'll let you know exactly when they arrive. We'll be ready. Plainclothes unit will be nearby. You give us the signal. We move in. Just be safe, Mr. Harrison. Don't take unnecessary risks. I looked at the message for a long moment, then typed, The only risk is letting them get away with it. I heard footsteps upstairs, Shannon and Jared walking down the hallway, their bedroom door closed. I pulled up the living room camera feed, rewound to earlier that evening. There they were, after I'd gone to bed. Jared opening a bottle of champagne, Shannon laughing, her face animated in a way I hadn't seen in months. April 2nd, Jared said, raising his glass. We'll own this place. $850,000. Minus Russell's cut. That's still over $800,000 for us. What about my dad? What about him? He's signing the papers willingly. If he tries to claim fraud later, we've got witnesses. We've got official documents. He's a confused old man. No one will believe him. Jared took a drink. By the time he figures out what happened, we'll be in Mexico, living like royalty. Shannon clinked her glass against his. To early retirement. To stupid old men who trust their children. They laughed. Both of them. My daughter and the man she'd married, laughing about destroying me. I closed the video and sat in the darkness. The antique clock on my shelf, an 1890 Vienna regulator, chimed the hour. 1 a.m. Exactly on time, as always. No matter what happened, that clock would keep running. Precise, unchanging, trustworthy, unlike people. I opened my laptop and began composing an email to Detective Anderson. Everything they'd said time-stamped. Every piece of evidence, organized chronologically. Building the case piece by piece until it was ironclad. By 3 a.m., I'd created a timeline that would make any prosecutor salivate. Jared's previous victims, his pattern of behavior, Shannon's involvement, their plans to flee the country, their conspiracy to forge documents. This wasn't just fraud anymore. This was organized crime. I hit send and leaned back in my chair. 16 days until April 2nd. 16 days to maintain the performance. 16 days to let them believe they'd won. And then I'd show them what happens when you try to con someone who spent 40 years spotting cons. The Vienna regulator ticked steadily, each second bringing us closer to the moment when everything would change. I smiled in the darkness. Not a pleasant smile, a patient one. They wanted my house. They wanted my money. They wanted to destroy everything I'd built. Let them try. And when they failed, when they were standing in handcuffs, realizing exactly how badly they'd miscalculated, I'd be there to watch. Because that's what happens when you underestimate the old man. You forget that he got old by being smarter than you, and that's when you lose everything. 6 days after my meeting with Detective Anderson, I found myself back in Gerald Martinez's office. This time, there was a third person present, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense expression. Gerald introduced her as Assistant District Attorney Rebecca Walsh. Mr. Harrison, she said, shaking my hand firmly, I've reviewed everything Detective Anderson sent over. The camera footage, the investigator's report, the pattern of prior offenses. This is one of the most thoroughly documented fraud cases I've seen in my career. Does that mean you can prosecute? Prosecute? Mr. Harrison, I can build a federal case. Interstate fraud, identity theft, conspiracy, forgery? Jared Baxter is looking at decades, not years. She opened her briefcase and pulled out a thick folder. But we need to catch him in the act, with witnesses. That's where you come in. Over the next hour, we mapped out the operation. Detective Anderson would position plainclothes officers in an unmarked van down the street. I'd wear a small audio recorder, not for evidence since Oregon is a one-party consent state, and my cameras covered that, but as a backup and for real-time monitoring. When Jared and his fake notary, Russell Woods, attempted to execute the fraudulent transfer, I'd say a specific phrase. I think I need to read this one more time. That would be the signal for police to enter. What if they get violent? Gerald asked. What if they realize he's on to them? Anderson leaned back in his chair. We'll have 4 officers within 30 seconds of the door. But honestly, guys like Baxter, they're cowards. They run scams on elderly victims because they think they won't fight back. The moment they see badges, they'll fold. I hoped he was right. That evening, I drove to Eugene. Saul Fisher had been tracking Russell Woods for the past week, and today Woods had a meeting at a coffee shop on Willamette Street. I wanted to see the man who'd agreed to forge legal documents for $12,000. Saul was waiting in his car across the street. I slid into the passenger seat. That's him, Saul said, nodding toward the window. Russell Woods, 53, disbarred attorney, currently under investigation in Lane County for notary fraud. Your son-in-law sure knows how to pick his accomplices. I watched through the coffee shop window. Woods was a thin man with graying hair wearing a cheap suit. He sat alone, nervously checking his watch every few minutes. Then Jared walked in. The sight of my son-in-law made my jaw tighten. He looked relaxed, confident. He sat down across from Woods and immediately pulled out documents. Even from this distance, I could see Woods examining them, nodding. What are they doing? I asked. Saul adjusted his camera with the telephoto lens. Probably going over the final details? Signature placement, date stamps, witness names. Woods is showing him the fake seal he'll use. Click, click, click. The camera captured everything. Don't worry, Mr. Harrison. We've got multiple angles. This meeting alone adds conspiracy charges. After 20 minutes, they stood, shook hands. Jared slid an envelope across the table, probably half the payment up front. Then they left separately. I sat in Saul's car for a long moment after they'd gone. How many people has he done this to? Woods? Or your son-in-law? Both. Saul pulled out his notebook. Woods has been implicated in at least 7 fraudulent notarizations over the past 5 years. Never charged because victims didn't pursue it, or cases fell apart. As for Baxter, based on what I've found, he's successfully completed at least 3 major cons, totaling over $2 million. There are probably others we haven't uncovered. $2 million, stolen from people who trusted him, people like me. How many victims are still suffering? I asked quietly. 2 that I know of. The couple in Washington lost their home, had to move in with their son. The woman in California, Patricia Hoffman, lost everything. She's living in a studio apartment now, working at 68 years old because Baxter cleaned out her retirement. Something cold settled in my chest. This wasn't just about me anymore. This was about stopping a predator who'd been hunting vulnerable people for years. I drove home that evening with a clarity I hadn't felt in weeks. When I walked through my door, Shannon was in the kitchen making dinner. She looked up and smiled. "Hey, Dad, you're just in time. I made your favorite, meatloaf." My favorite. She remembered. Or maybe she was just playing her part in this elaborate con, trying to keep me comfortable until they could strike. "That's wonderful, sweetheart. Thank you." Jared came downstairs, freshly showered. "Abner, good timing. We were just talking about April 2nd. You're still feeling good about signing those papers?" "Absolutely. I think it's the right decision." I kept my voice light, almost cheerful. "In fact, I was thinking, after we sign, maybe we should celebrate. I could take us all out to dinner." Shannon and Jared exchanged a glance. Quick, but I caught it. "That sounds great, Dad," Shannon said. "Really great." We sat down to dinner. They were unusually attentive, asking about my day, laughing at my stories, playing the loving family. I matched their energy, playing the grateful father. But later that night, after they'd gone to bed, I pulled up the camera footage from earlier in the evening. There they were before I'd come home, in the living room. 6 more days, Jared said. 6 days and this place is ours. Shannon was pacing. What about after? What if he tries to fight it? He's 67 and confused. We've been documenting his forgetfulness for months. We'll say he signed willingly, that he was happy to pass the house to his loving daughter. Russell's paperwork will be perfect. Backdated, official-looking, everything. By the time any court questions it, we'll be in Mexico. You're sure about Mexico? I've already got accounts set up in Puerto Vallarta. Transferred half our savings yesterday. The day after we sign, we'll put this place on the market, then leave for a vacation. We'll never come back. Shannon nodded slowly. And what about Dad? What happens to him? Jared shrugged. That's not our problem. He can figure it out, or not. Either way, he won't have any money to fight us with. I closed the video and sat in the darkness. They were planning to leave me homeless, penniless. At 67 years old, they were going to destroy my life and disappear to another country. The next morning, I had a casual conversation with them over breakfast. You know, I said, buttering my toast, I've been thinking about the future. After we transfer the house, maybe I should look into those retirement communities. I saw a nice one in Beaverton the other day. Jared's eyes lit up. That's a great idea, Abner. Really responsible thinking. Those places have medical staff, activities. Much better than living alone. And it would give you, too, the house to yourselves. Start fresh, you know? Shannon reached across and squeezed my hand. Dad, that's so thoughtful. We'd help you find the perfect place. The perfect place. Sure they would. Right after they'd stolen everything I owned. I spent the afternoon making phone calls. Confirmed final details with Detective Anderson. Checked in with Gerald about legal procedures. Made sure Rebecca Walsh had everything she needed for the prosecution. That evening, I sat in my study with my father's pocket watch, an 1891 Waltham, gold case, perfectly maintained. He'd given it to me on my 30th birthday. Time is the only thing we can't get back, he'd said, so use it wisely. I'd used my time wisely, built a career, raised a daughter, lived honestly, and now that daughter was plotting to take everything. But I'd used my time wisely these past weeks, too. Documented everything. Built an ironclad case. Set a trap so perfect they'd never see it coming. I wound the watch carefully, listening to the precise click of the gears. 4 more days until April 2nd. 4 more days until they learned what happens when you underestimate the old man who's been watching you all along. 2 days before the scheduled signing, Jared made a casual announcement at dinner. I need to drive down to Eugene tomorrow. Business thing. Should be back by evening. What kind of business? I asked innocently. Just tying up some loose ends with a client. Boring real estate stuff. I knew exactly what he was doing. Final meeting with Russell Woods. Picking up the forged documents. Making sure everything was ready. Do you need any company? Shannon asked him. No, better if I go alone. More professional. He turned to me. You'll be okay here tomorrow, Abner? Shannon can make you lunch. I'll be fine. You go do what you need to do. The next morning, I watched him leave from my bedroom window. Waited 15 minutes, then called Saul Fisher. He's on the move. I'm already on him. Left your place at 8:30, heading south on I-5. I'll stay back. Keep you posted. For the next several hours, I tried to keep busy. Organized my clock collection, read the newspaper, made small talk with Shannon when she brought me a sandwich at noon. Dad, she said, sitting down across from me, I just want you to know, tomorrow is going to be really good. For all of us. You're making the right choice. I looked at my daughter, really looked at her, tried to find some trace of the little girl I'd raised, the one who'd cried when we found an injured bird in the yard, the one who'd made me breakfast in bed on Father's Day, even though the eggs were burnt and the toast was cold. Where had that girl gone? I hope so, sweetheart, I said quietly. I really hope so. My phone buzzed. Text from Saul. Meeting complete. Package exchanged. Returning north. The package. the forged documents that would supposedly transfer my $890,000 house to them, signed with my fake signature, notarized by a disbarred attorney, backdated to make it look legitimate. That evening, I called Detective Anderson. "Tomorrow at 2 p.m. They'll have everything ready. We'll be there at 1:30. Park down the street in an unmarked van. You'll have a wire, just a precaution. When you're ready for us to move in, say the phrase, 'I think I need to read this one more time.' That's it. We'll be through the door in 15 seconds. Mr. Harrison, I want you to know, you're doing the right thing. Men like Baxter, they don't stop until someone stops them." That night, I couldn't sleep. Lay in bed, listening to the house settle. Heard Jared and Shannon talking in their room, voices too low to make out words, but the tone was excited, celebrating their upcoming victory. At 11 p.m., I got up and went to my study, pulled up the camera feeds one more time. There was Jared on his phone in the kitchen. Shannon must have been asleep. "Yeah, it's all set," he was saying. "Tomorrow at 2. The old man's signing everything over. We'll have the house on the market by Friday." A pause. "No, he doesn't suspect anything. He's too far gone. Keeps forgetting where he puts his glasses, asking the same questions twice." Jared laughed. "Yeah, easy money. Easiest 800 grand I've ever made." I saved the recording and sat back. Easy money. That's all I was to him. Not his father-in-law, not Shannon's father. Just an easy mark. An old fool too stupid to realize he was being robbed. The next morning arrived gray and cold. Classic Portland spring weather. I dressed carefully. Pressed slacks, a button-down shirt. Wanted to look presentable for what was coming. Shannon made pancakes for breakfast. "Big day today, Dad. Are you excited?" "Excited. Yes, that's one word for it." Jared was unusually chatty. "So after we sign, I was thinking maybe we could go out for dinner. Celebrate properly. Your choice of restaurant." "That's thoughtful. Let's see how the afternoon goes." At 1:15, I excused myself to use the bathroom. Detective Anderson had arranged for an officer to drop off the recording device in my mailbox. I retrieved it, tucked it into my shirt pocket, turned it on. The battery pack went in my inside jacket pocket. At 1:30, I looked out my study window. The unmarked van was parked 3 houses down. Dark windows. Could have been anyone. But I knew 4 police officers were inside, listening to every word transmitted from my wire. At 1:45, Jared's phone rang. He answered, spoke briefly, then came to find me. "Abner, the notary, just called. He's running a few minutes late. Should be here by 2:15. "That's fine. I'm in no rush." At 2 o'clock, Jared was pacing. Shannon kept checking her phone, both of them radiating nervous energy, though they were trying to hide it. At 2:13, the doorbell rang. Jared practically ran to answer it. A moment later, he returned with a man I recognized from Saul's photos. Russell Woods, tall, thin, professional-looking in his cheap suit, carrying a leather briefcase. "Mr. Harrison," Woods said, extending his hand. "Russell Woods. I'm the notary who'll be handling your documents today." I shook his hand. It was clammy. "Nice to meet you, Mr. Woods." We all sat in the living room, Jared and Shannon on the couch, practically vibrating with anticipation. Woods at the coffee table, opening his briefcase. Me in my favorite chair, the one I'd sat in 10,000 times over the years. Woods pulled out a stack of papers, the same quitclaim deed I'd seen weeks ago, now properly notarized with Russell's fake seal. "This is a straightforward property transfer," he began, his voice rehearsed. "You're transferring ownership of this property to Jared Coleman and Shannon Coleman Harrison. Standard procedure. Just need your signature here, here, and here." He pointed to the flag pages. I leaned forward, squinting at the documents like the confused old man they expected. "And this is for insurance, right?" I asked. Woods glanced at Jared. Jared nodded encouragingly. "That's right, Abner. Insurance purposes. We talked about this." I picked up the pen Woods offered, held it over the first signature line. Then I set it down. "You know," I said slowly, "I spent 40 years as a notary, specialized in real estate law." The room temperature seemed to drop. Woods' smile faltered. Jared's face went very still. "And in those 40 years, I learned to spot forgeries." I tapped the notary seal on the document. "This seal, for example. It's the wrong format. Oregon updated notary seal requirements in 2018. This is the old style." Woods started to stand. I think there's been a misunderstanding. Sit down, Mr. Woods. Or should I say former attorney Russell Woods, disbarred in 2021 for ethical violations? He sat. His face had gone the color of old newspaper. I turned to Jared. And you, Jared Coleman. Except that's not your real name, is it? It's Jared Baxter, born in Tacoma, convicted of check fraud at 25. 3 known victims of real estate fraud totaling over $2 million. Jared's mouth opened. Nothing came out. He looked like a fish pulled from water, gasping. Shannon stood up. Dad, what are you talking about? This is crazy. Sit down, Shannon. My voice was cold, colder than I'd ever used with her. I have you on camera, multiple cameras actually, discussing how to drug my tea, planning to forge my signature, celebrating stealing my house. Every conversation, every plan, every word, all recorded. Her face went white. You were recording us? In my own home? Yes. Perfectly legal in Oregon. I looked at all 3 of them. Woods was shaking. Jared's jaw was clenched so tight I could see the muscles jumping. Shannon had tears starting to form, but whether they were real or calculated, I no longer cared. I also know about Patricia Hoffman in California, I continued, the couple in Washington. Every victim you've left in your wake, Jared. Or should I start calling you what you really are? A serial con artist who targets elderly people. Jared finally found his voice. You can't prove any of this. You're just a confused old man who... I think I need to read this one more time, I said clearly. Jared blinked. What? The front door burst open. Detective Philip Anderson came through first, badge out, followed by 3 uniformed officers. Jared Baxter, Russell Woods, you're under arrest for attempted fraud, forgery, and conspiracy to commit real estate fraud. The room exploded into chaos. Woods tried to run for the back door. An officer caught him before he made it 3 steps. Jared stood frozen, his face cycling through emotions. Shock, rage, disbelief, then something like a cornered animal's panic. Shannon dropped to her knees. Dad, please! I didn't mean... He made me. I was scared. I looked down at her. My daughter. On her knees on my living room floor, begging. The cameras recorded you suggesting they put sedatives in my tea, Shannon. Not Jared. You. My voice was steady, but inside, something was breaking. Every word, every plan. You knew exactly what you were doing. Mr. Harrison, Detective Anderson said, approaching me. You okay? I'm fine. I watched as they handcuffed Jared. His face had gone from pale to red, veins standing out on his neck. You stupid old man, he spat. You think you've won? I'll beat this. I always beat it. Not this time, Anderson said, pulling him toward the door. We've got you on federal charges, interstate fraud. The FBI's already involved. You're done. As they let him out, Jared twisted back to look at me. The mask was completely gone now. Nothing left but rage and hatred. This isn't over. Yes, I said quietly. It is. They took Shannon out separately. She was crying, real or fake. I couldn't tell anymore. She called out to me as they walked her to the patrol car. Dad, please, don't let them do this. I'm your daughter. I stood in my doorway and watched the police cars drive away. Neighbors were coming out, watching. Lindsay Carter from next door approached cautiously. Abner, what's happening? Justice, I said. That's what's happening. I went back inside my empty house and closed the door, sat down in my chair. The forged documents were still on the coffee table, evidence bags beside them. My phone buzzed. Text from Detective Anderson. You did good today. Real good. We'll need you to come down tomorrow for a formal statement. But the DA says this is airtight. Baxter's looking at 20-plus years federal time. I set the phone down and looked around my living room. Everything was the same. Same furniture, same clocks ticking on the walls, same afternoon light coming through the windows. Everything was different. I'd won, protected my home, stopped a serial criminal, probably saved future victims. But I'd also just sent my daughter to jail. The old Ansonia clock on the mantel struck 3. Right on time, precise, unforgiving, just like justice. I sat there alone in the silence, and for the first time since this all began, I let myself feel the weight of what I'd done. It was the right thing, but that didn't make it hurt any less. The police station was colder than I expected. Or maybe that was just me. Detective Anderson had asked me to come in the next morning to give a formal statement. I sat in a small interview room with pale green walls and a two-way mirror, recounting everything for the third time. "And you're certain Shannon was a willing participant?" the detective asked, his pen hovering over his notepad. "The cameras don't lie. She suggested drugging me. She helped to plan the sale of my house. She knew exactly what she was doing." My voice was steady, but my hands weren't. I kept them folded on the table. "She's my daughter. But she made her choices." Anderson nodded slowly. "I know this isn't easy, Mr. Harrison. For what it's worth, you probably saved a dozen other people from becoming victims. Baxter would have kept going." Would have. Past tense. Because I'd stopped him. The next few hours were a blur. More questions, paperwork. Rebecca Walsh, the assistant district attorney, came in with news that made everything feel surreal. "The FBI is taking lead on this," she said, settling into the chair across from me. "Interstate fraud, multiple victims across state lines. This is federal jurisdiction now. They're looking at charging Baxter with conspiracy, wire fraud, identity theft, and about 6 other felonies. We're building a RICO case." "RICO?" I didn't follow. "Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. Basically, we're arguing he was running a criminal enterprise. If it sticks, he's looking at 20 to 25 years minimum in federal prison." 25 years. Jared Baxter would be 63 when he got out, if he got out. "What about Shannon?" Walsh's expression softened slightly. "She's cooperating. Claims Baxter manipulated her, that she was afraid of him. The camera footage contradicts that narrative. But she's young. She's your daughter. The prosecutor might offer a deal. Reduced charges in exchange for testimony against Baxter." "How reduced?" "Could be probation with community service if she fully cooperates. Could be supervised release. Depends on what she gives us and how credible her testimony is." I sat with that information. Part of me, the father part, felt relief. The other part, the one that had watched her on camera plotting to drug me, felt nothing but cold certainty. She'd made her bed. "Russell Woods is singing like a canary," Anderson added. "He's given us 5 other cases where he worked with Baxter. Names, dates, amounts. He's looking at 8 to 10 years, but he might get it reduced to 5 if he keeps cooperating." That afternoon, I finally went home. The house felt different, emptier. The living room where the confrontation had happened yesterday seemed staged, like a movie set waiting for actors who'd never return. Lindsay Carter, my neighbor, knocked on my door around dinner time. She's a widow in her early 60s, lived next door for 15 years. Always friendly, always respectful of boundaries. "Abner, I saw the police cars yesterday." She held a casserole dish. "I made too much chicken and rice. Thought you might want some company." We sat at my kitchen table, the same table where Jared had tried to pressure me into signing those papers. I told her an abbreviated version of the story. She listened without interrupting, her eyes growing wider with each detail. "Your own daughter," she finally said. "Abner, I'm so sorry." "So am I." "But you did the right thing. You had to protect yourself." "I know. Doesn't make it easier." She reached across and squeezed my hand. "You're stronger than you think, and you're not alone. If you need anything, and I mean anything, you call me. Even if it's 3 a.m. and you can't sleep." After she left, I sat in my study, looking at the hidden cameras I'd installed. They'd served their purpose. Time to take them down. But as I reached for the one in the living room, my phone rang. Gerald Martinez. "Abner, I've got news. The FBI located accounts in the Cayman Islands and Mexico under various names tied to Baxter. They're talking about $4 million. $4 million? This guy was more successful at his con than we realized. $4 million stolen from people who'd trusted him. People like me who'd opened their homes and their hearts." "There's something else," Gerald continued. "2 of his previous victims, the couple from Washington and Patricia Hoffman from California, they want to meet you. They're coming to Portland for the preliminary hearings. They want to thank you personally." "Thank me? For what? For being lucky enough to recognize the con? For having the resources to fight back?" "Sure," I said. "I'll meet them." Over the next few days, more details emerged. Russell Woods had been working with Jared for 3 years. They'd successfully completed 4 major frauds before attempting mine. Each time, they'd target elderly homeowners, through a female accomplice who'd gain access to the family. Shannon wasn't the first daughter to betray her father for Jared Baxter, but if I had anything to say about it, she'd be the last. On the fourth day after the arrests, Gerald called again. Shannon wants to see you. She's out on bail, ankle monitor, supervised release. Her lawyer says she wants to apologize in person. My first instinct was to refuse. I'd said everything I needed to say while she was being handcuffed on my living room floor. But curiosity won out. Or maybe it was that stubborn paternal instinct that hoped, despite everything, that my daughter might show some genuine remorse. When? Tomorrow afternoon, 2:00. Her lawyer will be present. So will I, if you want. Yes, I want you there. That night, I couldn't sleep. Kept replaying memories. Shannon at 6, learning to ride a bike. Shannon at 12, crying in my arms after her mother's funeral. Shannon at 18, graduating high school, so proud and full of promise. Where had I gone wrong? Or had I? Maybe some people just make bad choices, regardless of how they're raised. Maybe love and good intentions aren't enough. The next afternoon, they arrived. Shannon's lawyer was a sharp-looking woman in her 30s named Patricia Morrison. Shannon looked terrible, pale, hollow-eyed, her hair pulled back in a messy ponytail. Nothing like the confident woman who'd helped plan to steal my home. We sat in my living room. The irony wasn't lost on me. This was where it had all come crashing down 3 days ago. Shannon couldn't meet my eyes. Dad, I don't even know where to start. The beginning works, I said flatly. She took a shaky breath. I was stupid. So incredibly stupid. Jared, when I met him, he was charming and successful, and he made me feel special. But then things changed. He started talking about money, about how unfair it was that you had so much and we were struggling. I offered to help you, multiple times. I know. Her voice cracked. I know you did. But Jared, he said, accepting help from you made us look weak. He said we needed to take control of our own future, and somehow, over time, that turned into this plan to... She couldn't finish the sentence. To steal my house, I finished for her. Yes. Tears were streaming down her face now. I told myself it wasn't really stealing because eventually it would be mine anyway, right? When you passed away, I convinced myself we were just accelerating the inevitable. And the sleeping pills you suggested putting in my tea? Was that also accelerating the inevitable? She flinched like I'd slapped her. I never actually did that. I just said it. I was frustrated and angry and willing to drug your father to steal from him. Patricia Morrison, her lawyer, interjected. Mr. Harrison, Shannon is fully prepared to cooperate with the investigation. She's given the FBI detailed information about Jared's operations, his contacts, his financial networks. She's taking full responsibility for her actions. I looked at Shannon, really looked at her, tried to find some piece of the daughter I'd raised. Maybe she was in there somewhere, buried under bad decisions and worse influences. Shannon, I have one question. Just one. Were you ever going to tell me the truth? If I'd signed those papers, if the fraud had worked, were you planning to come clean at some point? She was quiet for a long moment. Then quietly, no. We were going to Mexico. We'd already transferred money, found an apartment in Puerto Vallarta. The plan was to disappear. There it was, the truth. They weren't just going to rob me. They were going to abandon me, leave me homeless and broke, and vanish to another country. Thank you for your honesty, I said, standing up. Now I'd like you to leave. Dad, please. The cameras recorded everything, Shannon. Every conversation, every plan, every laugh you shared with Jared about the stupid old man you were conning. I don't know who you've become, but you're not the daughter I raised. That girl died somewhere along the way, and I'm still mourning her. Shannon broke down completely, sobbing into her hands. Her lawyer put an arm around her shoulders, guided her toward the door. At the threshold, Shannon turned back. I love you, Dad. I love my daughter, too, I said, but I don't know you anymore. After they left, Gerald stayed. That was brutal, Abner, but probably necessary. She would have let me become homeless, penniless, at 67 years old. I walked to the window, looked out at the street. Love has to have boundaries. Otherwise, it's just enabling. The prosecutor is offering her 4 years probation with supervised release and 200 hours of community service. in exchange for her full cooperation. She should take it. She's lucky it's not prison. She is? And Abner? For what it's worth, you're handling this with more grace than most people would. Grace. That was a generous word for the hollow, angry ache in my chest. But I'd survive. I always did. 2 days later, I met Patricia Hoffman and the Washingtons, Charles and Marie. They'd flown to Portland for the preliminary hearing, and we'd arranged to meet at a coffee shop downtown, far from the courthouse and the media. Patricia was 68, small-framed with gray hair and sharp blue eyes that had probably once been trusting. Now they held the wariness of someone who'd been burned. The Washingtons were in their 70s, both looking tired but determined. "Mr. Harrison," Patricia said, shaking my hand firmly, "I can't tell you what it means that you fought back, that you stopped him." We sat down with our coffees. For the next hour, they told me their stories. Patricia's daughter had brought Jared into their lives 3 years ago. He'd been charming, helpful, always ready with financial advice. Within 6 months, he'd convinced Patricia to sign papers that transferred her house into a protective trust that he controlled. By the time she realized what had happened, he'd refinanced the property, pulled out $480,000 in equity, and disappeared. Her daughter had gone with him. "I lost my home," Patricia said quietly. "Had to move into a studio apartment. At 65 years old, I'm working part-time at a grocery store because my retirement was tied up in that house." The Washington story was similar, but worse. Charles had been recovering from a stroke when their son-in-law, yes, another family connection, had helped them restructure their finances. $423,000 vanished. They'd spent 2 years fighting legal battles before the case was dropped due to insufficient evidence. "We knew he did it," Marie said, her voice hard, "but we couldn't prove it. He was too careful. Until now. The FBI says your evidence, the cameras, the recordings, the investigators' work, it's helping them build cases for all of us," Charles added. "They're trying to recover some of the money from his offshore accounts." "Some?" I asked. "He spent a lot of it. Luxury cars, expensive trips, gambling, but there might be $1 million or so they can recover. Split between all the victims, it's not much, but it's something. $1 million, out of $4 million stolen. The rest was gone, spent on Jared's lifestyle while his victims struggled. I'm sorry," I said. "I'm sorry he did this to you. I'm sorry it took someone like me to stop him." "Don't apologize," Patricia said firmly. "You did what we couldn't. You had the resources, the knowledge, and the courage to fight back. You saved other people from going through what we went through." Later that evening, Detective Anderson called with an update. "Baxter's trying to negotiate a plea deal. His lawyer's arguing that Shannon was the mastermind, that she manipulated him into targeting you." I almost laughed. "That's absurd. The man's a serial criminal with 3 prior victims." "We know. The prosecutor's not buying it, but Baxter's lawyer is pushing hard. They're claiming Shannon seduced him, convinced him to target you, that he was just following her lead. He's trying to flip the script, make himself the victim." "Exactly. It's a desperate move. Won't work, but it tells us he's scared." The preliminary hearing was scheduled for the following week. Gerald prepared me for testimony, running through potential questions, making sure I was ready for Jared's defense attorney to attack my credibility. "They'll try to paint you as paranoid," Gerald said. "They'll suggest you misinterpreted innocent conversations. They'll claim the cameras were invasive and your motives were suspicious. Let them try. The recordings speak for themselves. They do, but juries can be unpredictable. We need you calm, factual, unshakable." The night before the hearing, I sat in my study, reviewing everything one more time. The timeline, the evidence, the recordings, making sure I had every detail memorized. My phone rang. "Unknown number," I answered cautiously. "Abner." Shannon's voice, barely a whisper. "Please don't hang up." I should have. Should have ended the call immediately, but I didn't. "What do you want, Shannon?" "I need you to know I'm testifying. Against Jared. I'm telling them everything, all the previous cons, all the planning, everything I know. Your lawyer already told me you're cooperating. No, I mean everything. Things the FBI doesn't even know yet. About other victims, other accounts. I'm burning every bridge with Jared to make this right. Why? Because you're my father. Because I destroyed something that can never be fixed. But maybe I can stop him from doing it to anyone else. Because, her voice broke, because I'm so ashamed of what I became. I wanted to stay angry, wanted to keep that cold distance, but I heard something in her voice I hadn't heard before. Genuine remorse, real understanding of the damage she'd caused. Are you safe? I asked, surprising myself. I have a protective order. Jared's not allowed to contact me. His lawyer tried, but the prosecutor shut it down. They know he'll try to intimidate me into silence. Good. Dad, I don't expect forgiveness. I know I don't deserve it. But I want you to know that when I testify, I'm not doing it for a plea deal. I'm doing it because it's right. Because you taught me to do what's right, even when I forgot for a while. After we hung up, I sat in the darkness for a long time. The clocks ticked around me, marking seconds and minutes and hours. Unchanging, reliable, unlike people, unlike trust, unlike love. But maybe there was something salvageable in Shannon, some piece of the girl I'd raised, fighting her way back to the surface. Or maybe I was just a foolish old man, hoping for redemption that would never come. The next morning I dressed in my best suit. Gerald picked me up at 9, and we drove to the federal courthouse downtown. Media vans were already parked outside. This case had become news. Serial con artist caught by retired notary, read one headline. Daughter betrays father in $800,000 fraud, read another. Inside, the courthouse was intimidatingly formal. Security, metal detectors, long hallways echoing with footsteps and hushed conversations. And then I saw him, Jared Baxter in an orange jumpsuit, handcuffed, flanked by 2 federal marshals. He looked smaller somehow, less threatening, just a man who'd gotten caught. Our eyes met across the hallway, his face twisted into something between rage and contempt. He mouthed something I couldn't quite make out, but the intent was clear, a threat, a promise of retaliation. I smiled at him, just a small, cold smile, and watched his face go pale as he realized, truly realized, that he'd underestimated me, that his con had failed, that his carefully constructed world was collapsing around him. Come on, Gerald said, guiding me past. Let's go make sure justice is served. As we walked into the courtroom, I felt something shift inside me. The grief and anger were still there. The sense of betrayal, the loss of my daughter, the violation of my home and trust. All of it remained, but underneath it was something else, something harder and colder and more certain. I'd been a victim, but I'd refused to stay one. I'd fought back, and I'd won. And now I'd make sure Jared Baxter paid for every person he'd hurt, every family he'd destroyed, every trust he'd betrayed. The judge entered. We all stood, and the real reckoning began. The trial lasted 3 weeks. I took the stand on the second day, describing everything calmly. The fake documents, the hidden cameras, the recordings of their plotting. Jared's defense attorney tried to shake me. Isn't it possible you misinterpreted innocent conversations? I smiled slightly. I can tell the difference between innocent conversation and conspiracy to commit fraud. The jury liked that. Shannon testified, detailing how Jared had groomed her, shown her his previous scores, convinced her it was victimless. He told me my father wouldn't miss the money, she said through tears, that we deserved this. Russell Woods admitted to 7 fraudulent notarizations over 3 years. Patricia Hoffman described working at 68 because Jared stole her retirement. The Washingtons broke down explaining how they'd lost their family home. Through it all, Jared maintained his innocence, claimed Shannon seduced him, that I was a vengeful old man. The jury deliberated 6 hours. Their verdict was unanimous. Guilty. Jared's face went pale. He gripped the table, knuckles white. His mask slipped completely. Just a small, pathetic man who'd built his life on lies. 3 days later came sentencing. Judge Martha Reeves looked down at Jared over her reading glasses. I've never seen such callous disregard for human suffering. You targeted the vulnerable, destroyed families, stole life savings. She sentenced him to 22 years in federal prison without parole. Russell Woods got 8 years. Shannon received 4 years supervised probation, 200 hours community service, and no contact with me without permission. After sentencing, Patricia Hoffman hugged me outside the courthouse. Thank you for being brave enough to fight. That evening, I walked through my empty house. took down the remaining cameras. On the mantel was Shannon's photo at 6 years old, holding my hand. I studied it, then put it in a drawer. Maybe someday, but not today. Lindsay brought dinner. "You're stronger than you know," she said. Maybe. Or maybe I was just a man who'd refused to be a victim. That night, Patricia Hoffman's letter arrived. "Because of your courage, the FBI recovered $843,000. I'll receive about $200,000, enough to finally retire with dignity. You gave me that. You gave all of us that." I folded the letter carefully. Justice had been served. It wasn't pretty or painless, but it was right. Months passed. Spring became summer in Portland. I settled back into routines. Morning walks, afternoon reading, maintaining my clock collection. I removed all traces of them from my house, repainted the guest bedroom into something mine alone. In early June, the Oregonian ran a feature: how a 67-year-old notary outsmarted a serial con artist. My phone didn't stop ringing for days. One call stood out. Gail Johnson from California, 69, one of Jared's earlier victims. "Because of you, the FBI recovered enough that I can finally retire. You saved more than just yourself. You saved all of us." Saul Fisher met me for coffee, sliding a check across the table. $34,000. Reimbursement for cameras, investigation, legal costs. You earned it. If the other victims could accept restitution with dignity, so could I. The FBI sent certificates of appreciation. My evidence had helped arrest 10 people, recover millions, save hundreds of potential future victims. One old man with hidden cameras. That's all it took to bring down an entire network. I framed the certificate in my study, a reminder that ordinary people can fight back. One Sunday afternoon, I sat by the window with my father's pocket watch. Outside, Portland hummed with summer life. Inside, my house was quiet, my peace. I thought about everything: the betrayal, the planning, the confrontation, the trial. I'd survived. More than that, I'd won. Protected my home, stopped a criminal, helped other victims find justice. The cost was high. I'd lost my daughter, at least for now. But I'd learned I was stronger, smarter, more resilient than I'd known. At 67, I'd transformed from victim to victor, from prey to predator. I wound the watch, listening to it tick, constant, reliable, honest, like me. I stood, placing the watch on its shelf among my collection. 47 timepieces, all keeping perfect time. The afternoon sun cast shadows through my house, my home, the place I'd protected. As I walked to the kitchen to make dinner, just myself, in my own house, on my own terms, I felt something I hadn't felt in months. Peace. Justice had been served. The right people were in prison. Victims received restitution. And I was here, living my life. It wasn't the ending I would have chosen, but it was the ending I'd earned, and sometimes that's enough. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left. Thank you for watching,